today, and Christin is having trouble getting in. Hopefully she'll be able to join us here shortly. Lee, remind us real quickly who you are and why you're associated with Texas Education 911, and then Monica, your turn.
I'm the executive director of the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, Texas. And the reason I'm associated has to do with the screenings and this considerable push for mental health services in schools with sometimes little, if any, semblance of parental rights.
And Monica, how about you?
Well, my name is Monica Leal Cline, and I'm the founder of It Takes a Family. And I started that, I don't remember how many years ago, but shortly after coming out of comprehensive sex education, I've been blowing the whistle on that and in other programs where parental rights are being, broken, how families being diminished. And so I focus a lot on educating parents on what they can do within their home and in their community and through legislation to strengthen their ability to stay the authority over their own children.
Wow. Well, thank you guys so much. I wanted to start off today talking about something I read in the news and see how that might send us in a particular direction. So earlier on, I guess it was on Friday, CBS in Austin had an article as well as something on the news that talked about an ombudsman bill that has been filed by Representative Jared Patterson from the Denton area. And he called it a game changer. It's a major game changer for public education because not all parents have the ability to hire a lawyer to fight the school districts. And he has been fighting the school districts himself. And so he very much understands what is going on there. It's interesting in the article, there are two people who have commented. David DeMatthews is an associate professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy at the University of Texas at Austin. And he feels that the bill also involves issues like critical race theory. That basically he says that Representative Patterson has been focused on things that are kind of, he didn't use the word conspiracy theories, but that's kind of what he was saying. Oh, Kristin's here joining us finally. Hallelujah.
Great.
And so anyway, we were talking about, they were talking about that. And I thought, okay, so that person doesn't like the idea of an ombudsman. And then I scroll down and I'm seeing comments from, surprise, surprise, TASB. And TASB says that there's a grievance process that school districts have and so parents already have options. And so I think it's really interesting when we get TASB's attention. I think that means this is an incredible bill. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about why do we like the idea of an ombudsman, and how might we answer those two entities who are saying that the ombudsman is unnecessary.
Who goes first? I've got something to say. So I liken what's going on in schools to what we used to have in psychiatric hospitals, because once upon a time, if they wanted to drug you, they could use, or people have, forwarded this idea of a 2-doctor rule. If 2 doctors agree that you need it, then you get it. And that's the way I feel about the grievance system. Is you've got the same school district where something went wrong, now being the arbiter over whether anything was violated. It doesn't work. You need someplace you can go. I mean, we all want parents to handle things as early as possible, as local as possible. But when it doesn't work, you need somebody in your corner, and you shouldn't have to go to court to do that.
Yeah. I would add that, there's very little accountability in Texas schools. And we know that because we know that parents will go through the grievance process that TASB is suggesting that they go through, and it takes years. And 2 years to a child in their school career, as we call it in education, is a lot. 2 years is a lot to a child. And so these are things that shouldn't take 2 years to solve. And at the end of that solution, there may be a change that's made, but there's really no consequence to the school district for doing something wrongful. And so there's really no to very little accountability in Texas schools. And I would say that, one of the things that's very well, the governor just listed parental rights in education and basically school choice and as a priority. And so we know there's no accountability in public education when the solution that they're offering to create accountability is a free market system in education. And so, I agree with Lee, though, that it is very similar, I think, to other institutions with these that serve vulnerable populations.
Yeah, and I'm glad you ended there with vulnerable populations, because that's where I'm really focused on is I am watching parents trying to figure out the grievance process.
Mhm.
It is very painful, and it's not about it being painful. It's the fact that essentially you're having to jump through hoops to find out what the process is in the first place. How do you even submit a grievance? Because it's not just shooting an email to the school or making a phone call to the school. It is a very specific process. It is a process where it has to be worded just right, from what I understand, in order for it to even be accepted. There's time frames. There's all kinds of nuances that go on with these grievances that, unless a parent is very familiar with this process, which parents are not, it fails. It fails them. And the reason it fails is because it's set up to fail. And so, in very simple words for me, is basically saying there's an institution, which is the school, that is supported and represented by TASB. And you want to submit a complaint to that school. And so basically, you're complaining to the person who's created the problem, who has a lawyer who's going to protect the person who created the problem. And you're hoping that the people who created the problem are going to help you fix it. It's not going to happen. And this is why the ombudsman is so important, because the parent needs their own representative that is not at the whim of TASB, is not at the whim of a lobbyist, is not at the whim of a larger government. It is representative for the parent, and even not necessarily the child itself, because the parent represents the child. And that's the way it is. So it's not the government now or the ombudsman representing the child separate from the parent. No, this is actually advocating for the parent, supporting the parent through a process to protect their own child. So this current grievance process is set up to fail for the parent. It has been failing the parents. And really, my understanding from many people who have done the grievance process, they're doing it because they want to show that there's a record of problems in our education system here in Texas, but not necessarily that many of them have actually had a good result from it. But at least now we're building cases.
Well, and I'd say, so my first grievance was filed back in 2016 when my school district in San Antonio, when I lived there, first changed from a curriculum for human sexuality that actually met the requirements of the Texas Education Code. They changed to one that did not. It actually violated the Texas Education Code. I could not get their attention no matter how many examples I gave them. They never actually looked at the book. The school board did not. Yet they made a decision that they felt like it was appropriate. Even though my complaint was very detailed. You all know me. I had tons and tons of examples as to why it violated the Texas Education Code. And I took it all the way up to the TEA. The TEA actually refused to open an investigation because they called the school district, and the school district assured them that they had answered my questions. That was the extent of their investigation. And then 2 years later, another family filed a similar grievance on the same curriculum because they identified the same thing. And what was interesting was, it might have been even a little later than that. The response of the school district was, well, I'm sorry, sir, but 3 or 4 years ago, however long it was, when we made the decision to adopt this curriculum, that's when you should have filed the complaint, not now. And his answer was, well, first of all, I didn't live here then. How could I have filed a grievance? But in their mind, that's all that mattered. And that went all the way up to the TEA. All the TEA did was send it back down to the school board and said, okay, you can't expect him to know what happened when he didn't even live in the school district. And you can't expect him to know everything that happens at a school board meeting. And then 27 months later, the school district finally made their decision that the curriculum, in their opinion, was lawful. And do you know why? How they made that? How they made that decision was actually based on my grievance and the fact the TEA did not open an investigation. They said that meant it was lawful. And so the whole system, I mean, that's a 27-month process, just one example. And that is what our school districts are doing to us. 99 out of 100 times. And those are not isolated incidents. I know people all across the state, and TASB actually is very, they're going to be harmed by this, in my opinion. And that's part of the reason they're not going to like this, is because right now, whether it be TASB or other lawyers, they're making tons of money off of the fact the school districts are fighting parents. And when an ombudsman comes into play, that fund stream that they have is going to go away. And I think it's also going to point out that TASB recommended policies are actually, my opinion, in violation of the law. And that will bear at the ombudsman. And so,
so
anyway.
For that comment, I think it's safe to say that we all believe that obviously TASB is worried about protecting their turf.
Yep.
As for the other commenter, I would submit, yes, there are parents who have complained about CRT. It's not my organization's issue at all, but I would say that to just chalk it all up to CRT is to deny the many other issues that parents complain about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely not just CRT. There are many issues, from sexualization to, I know Melissa has talked about discipline, mental health issues, basically interfering with children's minds, manipulation. So this is a long list. And what I'm hearing from what Melissa said is that TASB and the TEA are working as judge and jury on these cases, and they're always, basically, they're the ones that always win. So it's an unfair game here. It shouldn't be a game, and it's not really a game, but it's always unfair because they're policing themselves, and they're never going to have a verdict that says that they were guilty. So it's time for an ombudsman that is represented by the parents, and for the parents, for the families of the state of Texas, regardless of income. It is to serve every family in the state of Texas, especially, as Christin said, the most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think there are a couple things to point out on this bill. It's an imperfect bill. It still needs some work. But I do think it's incredibly courageous because it's a new idea. It's something the parents are asking for. And a couple things that to me stand out are is selected by the SBOE, the State Board of Education, which is an elected body, and it serves at the will of the SBOE. I also notice in this bill that they have the authority to investigate complaints involving the TEA, the State Board of Education, and the school districts. I think education service centers need to be added here, but I think it's incredibly bold because I think about all the programs that the TEA is pushing that could be investigated based on this language. And then also last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, whenever the State Board of Education adopted Goodhart's-Willcox, this would have been an incredible opportunity for them to evaluate that process, because I believe that violated the Texas Education Code as well. The way that they went about doing that and the curriculums that they evaluated right off the bat, I don't believe would have met the hurdle of meeting what the Texas Education Code requires. And so I just think it needs some work, but I'm really excited about it. And I think that I think the fact that we've got some other entities in the state that are speaking out against it, I think just shows how strong it actually is. What else do you guys want to talk about today? I know we could talk about that all day and give examples, but you guys can go, check out the Facebook page. We have a wonderful volunteer who's been interviewing parents, and she's just getting started. We have tons of parent interviews in the queue that she's doing, and they'll be posted. And a lot of them are about grievance problems and other problems in the school district that the ombudsman will fix.
Cool.
Very good. Well, I would like to just talk about really quickly, or if I could just take the opportunity to let everybody know that the Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids subcommittee for the RPT has started an educational campaign. And so every day remaining in the legislative session, there will be one title of a basically filthy book with examples sent to every single state legislator in Texas. And so we started that last Friday, and then we started with the book, What Girls Are Made Of. And today we're going to be sending out a new title. Haven't done it yet, but this is an effort to basically educate all of our legislators on what we're finding in Texas schools across the state, to let them know it's not an isolated problem. And anyway, it's pretty exciting.
I love that. And are you also sending it to the lieutenant governor and the governor's office?
You know, I haven't yet, but I think it's definitely something that we should do. So
something to consider. Can you explain to the people watching, like, what is the RPT? What role does the RPT play? Like the high level, for dummies kind of type version?
I know all these acronyms. So the RPT stands for Republican Party of Texas, and I am on the governing board of the Republican Party of Texas. There are two people like me from every single Senate district who serve on the board. And we have a legislative priorities committee, which I'm on, and I chair the subcommittee on Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids. So we have legislative priorities. We have 8 of them, and each 8 of those has a chair. And so what we're doing is helping to guide legislation and push legislation as a subcommittee. And Melissa and Monica both serve on the subcommittee. And Lee, you've consulted on several subcommittees, I think. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what we do without Lee Spiller.
I don't
the whole state of Texas would be in an absolute mess.
God, thank y'all. Yeah, sometimes it's rough being nonpartisan because there are so many conversations you'd like to have. And, and for us, it really is important to be open to everybody. But, we're really thankful for the opportunity to answer questions or give input.
And Christin, the SRECs, which is, you are one of them, they're all elected. Is that correct?
Yes. So they're elected by, not by the public, but by delegates to the state convention every 2 years.
Yes. And I was one of those delegates, and you are my representative, and I voted for you.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
What else you guys want to chat about today? We still have about 9 minutes.
I'll tell you something interesting, or it's interesting to me. As part of the last big school safety push, Texas adopted something called multi-tiered systems of support. And I think something that none of us knew at the time, including probably most of the legislators, was just how universal that would become. So we have universal mental health screenings, we have surveys. So recently, King County in Seattle, which, is far from being a conservative place, they are reporting on the data that is getting out with these surveys and the data that could become public. And it's just shocking. They're talking about a specific questionnaire that was done in the name of mental health. It collects the students' age, grade, race, language, gender identity, sexual orientation, school, and other details. And then the data is transmitted without student names to a for-profit software firm, which grants access to the Seattle Children's Research Institute. It says, with such sensitive information in hand, schools must determine whether kids' screening results are part of their education record. If so, parents would have a right, to see that their kids, that this information isn't shared. Apparently, some school districts have decided that it's not part of the education record. And
Interesting. That kind of highlights that they're not actually educating our children. Because if
Well,
it's part of the education record, you must be saying it's important. But if you're saying it's not, then you're actually saying that we're not educated. It's not part of the education, so what's the point?
and it points out that data privacy with all of these things is incredibly important. We don't know how Texas is treating this, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Parents, that is one of the biggest complaints we were getting from parents early on, was, oh, they're selling the data, blah, blah, blah. Well, we never could find proof whether they are or not. But the fact that, now you've got investigative reporters in Washington pointing out the different ways in which data can be shared and the different ways in which kids could be re-identified, I think it points to a huge problem. And I believe there are several data bills that have been filed. I need to look because this is an important issue.
Yeah, and Lee, what we've discovered, all of us just talking together and researching this together, is that much of that data is being collected through third-party vendors, whether it's a company that brought an app or a dashboard to the school, or communities and schools. They provide a multi-tiered system of support. They're a third-party vendor. They don't actually, so that means any work that they do with the kids, all their files are private. Their parents can't access them. If they deny for parents to see them, then parents don't have any way to access those files. And what we've learned is that communities and schools is assessing children at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, and they describe it as school-wide, which is interesting because their contract says that they will only serve children whose parents give consent for their services. So they're saying two different things. And really their goal is to be school-wide. They don't really want it to just be 5 kids or 20 kids or 100 kids. They're looking to be school-wide. But they do apparently share this assessment at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, and they describe it as it takes the children 30 minutes to fill out this assessment. Where are those results going? How is it being used? What does this assessment look like? What kind of questions are they asking? Are they asking about their identity? Are they asking about the values in their home? It doesn't even really matter. I mean, it does matter what they're asking, but it shouldn't be happening. It should not be happening.
If it's a private, personal, potentially stigmatizing issue, you should have parental consent. If you do it at all. And I don't know why these things even have any place in our schools.
They really don't. And one of our commenters is saying the only solution is to actually remove the devices from the schools. And I know that seems like really radical, but if you step back and you think, we just talked about why we need an ombudsman. We have lost trust with our school districts and the leaders in our school districts, on not just a couple school districts, but all across the state. It is a very rare situation that isn't happening. And so just think about it from a parent standpoint. Do I allow my child to go to the neighbor's house and get on whatever device they have over there? Do I need to trust the person I'm sending them to? Yes, I wouldn't send my child over there if I couldn't trust what they're going to do with my child related to electronics and other things, right? Well, the school districts have lost our trust, period. So why on earth as parents would we allow them to have access to our children via a device of any kind because of the abuses that could be associated with that? So it's just incredibly reasonable actually for parents to say no devices. We don't trust you. Build the trust back, start doing what you're supposed to be doing. And then locally, you can start having conversations about whether or not devices are appropriate. And we trust our school districts to do the right thing and be transparent. And so I have not seen a bill yet that says, that the devices should not be allowed or they should be, extremely restricted just for particular computer learning. But that type of bill needs to be coming.
Yeah. Well, but, the bill, Melissa, what I'm concerned about is what I read is that CIS is conducting this survey through their Google computers or their whatever they call them at the school. Yeah. So the Chromebooks, that's right. And so those are assigned to the kids. So when parents sign that permission form at the beginning of the year, like, oh yeah, cool. My child's getting a Chromebook to help them with school. Okay. And they're getting resources, how modern and great that is. Well, that's what they're using. It's not a separate device.
Well, and that's
So
what I guess the solution would be is those devices should not be allowed. Like
there
the
you
kids
go.
should be going back to like actual textbooks, paper and pen. Those one-to-one type devices, they're absolutely unnecessary, especially in grade school. And you could even argue, you know, my junior in high school, his ability to actually sit and write is severely compromised because all they're doing is stuff on the computer. Even he's a very smart kid, but remember when we were kids, we would write the date up in the upper corner. So we knew that February was the second month of the year. That's something that my junior actually was struggling with, and I didn't even realize it. This was a couple
Wow.
years ago, and I'm like, okay, we got to learn this. Obviously, school did not teach you this, and I thought they did. That's a perfect example of, well, the date's on the device, so they're not even teaching them some of these basic, simple things. And so I agree with our commenter. I think the devices need to be absolutely 100% out of the schools. And then maybe in middle school and high school, we have computer classes where they actually have a computer that is not for them, but shared by many people. So that it's
Computer lab.
data, like a computer lab. And I know that sounds old school, but again, what we're currently doing isn't working. We've lost trust. We cannot continue to give and give and give authority to our school districts to do things with our children. We need to pull it back. Real
It
quick.
is.
And when it comes to the surveys, though, I mean, I think there's a bill about the devices, but I think when it comes to surveys, we need to be very careful because if we get rid of devices, those surveys will continue on paper and pen or a private meeting.
We would still need to eliminate the surveys. You're right.
Yeah.
It wouldn't just be all or one. That's really a two-pronged problem. They shouldn't be surveying our kids, and they shouldn't be collecting data on them.
You know, I was just going to say really quickly, in education, we saw a real shift in the last decade to replace tactile experience with technology. And it also started, if y'all recall, a lot of schools stopped teaching cursive writing. Well, these are, tactile experiences, cursive writing. These are all things that we see in the research. They do all kinds of things for the brain. And we should not be replacing these tactile experiences, especially in early education, because there are consequences actually to the brain in doing that. And then what we've seen in the last decade is kids overall struggle with writing. And you can see that in, what's happening in universities where these, even students who graduated with a high GPA, they go into college and they are not at a college level or ready to enter college level writing classes. And, I think that it's crazy. There's a bill that came out. I can't remember the number. I'm sorry, but it basically it was just filed last week, and it would create a new standard in the TEKS that every child would learn how to code.
I saw that. Oh.
Remember seeing that? And I thought that is so crazy because it's not an essential knowledge or skill. And it's not something, like I think about me as a child, I would have had no interest in learning how to code. I have no interest in any of that. And so that would be a great elective, maybe in middle school, high school, but to create TEKS that every child needs to learn how to code, it's odd, so I would say that even though we need to restrict, I agree with everyone. I agree with the commenter, but we're seeing the opposite happen.
We are, and we really need to speak really loud because that's the direction they're headed. And unless we say this is unacceptable, that's where they're going to focus. So we're out of time today, but let's wrap it up with a comment or something, maybe.
Okay. Well, if I could just say one more thing, I know it's time to go, but one of the other things that parents really need to be aware of is that when they're using technology also in these Chromebooks, is they're using spell check and grammar check. And so your child is no longer, the bar is being lowered, and we're really dumbing down education. And that has an effect on the brain too. Yes. And so because it's just everyone needs to be aware of that as a parent.
Yeah, Kristen, well, you are correct about that, because even the surveys of the workforce, they're saying what we really need from new hires, from kids graduating either high school or college, is they need to learn how to communicate both verbally and written form, professional emails, being able to communicate over the phone, face to face. They're saying that those skills are lacking in our children and in the workforce. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you
that's
see it every day.
Yeah, every day we see that.
Yep.
So we're going to go ahead and wrap up, but I just have a couple announcements. If you're interested in more communities and schools information, the Monica Cline show this week or the last week just published 2 episodes. They were awesome, related to communities and schools. And Monica is quickly becoming our Texas expert on communities and schools. And so you should go check that out. Thursday is going to be Texas Education 911 Day at the Capitol. And there's information on the website. I'll post it in the comments to the show. But we would love to have you join us. We're going to walk the halls and talk to our legislators, make sure they understand the priorities that parents want, and really just want the voice of the parent to be walking the halls, and community members that support parents walking the halls on Thursday. And so, so look forward to anybody and everybody who is coming. And thank you guys for tuning in. I love doing this. I know we could talk all day, but I'm going to let you guys go and let you get back to your important work.
All right.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.